And so, yes, I think we're live. I'm here with my new friend Liam. How are you doing, Liam?
Hello, doing quite well, David. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, very nice to meet you. I'll just adjust you on the screen here, center you a little bit. Yeah, very nice to meet you. I don't know you. I know that I was one of my listeners recommended that I reach out to you. Was that? Do you remember who that was?
Yes, Sky Guardian, our mutual fan, also known as Vinay.
Vinay. Yeah. So thank you to Vinay. Shout out to you. And the way I always start my interviews is just to have the guest go way back to childhood, talk about the home, what was the setting in terms of faith, philosophy, ideas, practice, and your journey with all the twists and turns and bumps along the road, how you came into your own in terms of deciding for yourself, who you are, what you believe, and why you believe it. So maybe just walk us through all of that, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember praying every night when I was a child with my mother, and we practiced a few different traditions from different religions, actually. We went to church occasionally for Christmas, and sometimes we lit the menorah. And she liked to put little Buddha statues around the house. So from my mother's side, she kind of gave me an appreciation for many different religions without being any one in particular. And my father was kind of the complement of that. Instead of being everything, he was nothing. And he was just totally agnostic. And, I'd ask him about it, and he didn't have strong opinions really one way or another. So that gave me a very interesting platform for me to kind of, as you said, decide for myself what path spoke to my heart.
Wow. So what about the siblings? What's the situation there?
I do have one younger sister who is 14.
Oh,
Yes, 8 years
wow.
younger than I am.
Oh, so
Mhm.
you're like 20. I can't do math.
22. Yeah.
Can't do math at the best of times, much less under pressure. But so wow, you're very young, and so your journey's not over. I mean, hopefully. But so I'm just wondering, like, what do you believe today, and why, and what do your friends and family think about it?
Well, in a funny way, I still see myself as a synergy of my parents in that I have so much appreciation for many different paths. And I believe that if anyone really has selfless faith for some practice, then it will get you where you're meant to get to. And personally, I tend to practice bhakti yoga, which is, well, it could apply to many different paths since it just means trying to achieve union yoga through bhakti, which is devotion. So I
Wow.
just personally try to see the source within everyone and everything and see each moment as an opportunity for service and for the purification of my own self.
Oh, okay. And do you want to talk a little bit about the voyage, the discovery, the how you dove in, and what the ups and downs and the challenges of that might have been for a young Western mind?
Sure, yeah. Of course, we have a very interesting relationship with religion here in the West. For me, it actually came from studying mathematics of all things in university. I
Mm.
really aspired to become a scientific minded person. And I think you mentioned in your bio that uh, you once self identified as atheist and came to a more divine realization. And I have a very similar kind of disposition with having been an atheist during my school years. But the more I studied science, I realized how divine it truly is, this whole universe. And I started to stumble across some truths, so to speak, in higher mathematics that really sung to my heart in a way that I see resonates with a lot of religions at their core.
Wow. What? do you think of Pythagoras and his trip with numbers and the mystical numbers and stuff
Oh
like that?
yeah, yeah. All the Pythagoreans, they had a big kind of cult around numbers and seeing uh, divinity within the, I think it's the tetrad or the group of 10 dots arranged in a triangle, and they loved triangles. I think maybe they went a little too far with their obsession over geometry. However, I certainly appeal to uh, the sacredness that math has.
I often say that if we want to talk about creation over against the creator, for me they're separate. The god of monotheism is transcendent and immanent, and
Yeah.
we creatures are truly separate from God, and we are in danger of being eternally separate from God. And so the good news of Christianity is that we don't have to be. We can say yes to God's love, and we can enter into the life of God. So I don't want to get
Mhm.
into all of that right now, but we will eventually.
Sure.
But the reason that I bring this up is because why did I bring this up? What was the last thing we were talking about? I'm having a brain fart here. We're talking about
But
Pythagoras.
Pythagoras.
We're talking about Pythagoras. We're talking. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, I got it. I got it. Came back. What I often say about creation is that it boils down to relation, greater than, equal to, less than, left to the left of, to the right of, above, beneath. All these relations.
Yeah.
Um, and mathematics is all about precisely describing, or at least modeling, these relations. And I studied physics, so I studied quantum physics, I studied astrophysics, and I've worked in both. And that's really what it is. It's numbers which describe relationships,
Mhm.
uh, the angle, these vectors, the momentum, the position.
Yeah.
And so I've never met anyone that really disagrees with that statement that everything boils down to relation. But maybe you could just sort of reflect on that from your perspective.
Of course. We tend to focus on the objects of mathematics and physics in lower education, such as just the numbers and the shapes and things. But the deeper you get into it, you see that it is more about the ways in which these objects relate with one another. And of course, in Einstein's theory of relativity, it's all about the relationships between everything. And that shift from being object oriented to relationship oriented is, I think, a beautiful part of everyone's journey where they're no longer just interested in the objects of experience, the destination, but the journey of how one gets there, the relationship with yourself through time and with the source. But I also concur to the fact that what the source of the universe is not only immanent in the relationship, but also transcendental to it as well.
Ah, okay. My pet peeve. I've got two pet peeves when it comes to worldviews. One is the Mormons. God help me and forgive me, but I've got like a little pet peeve with their worldview. And the other one is the New Age, and the Eastern thought and all that sort of stuff. I love it, but my bone that I have to pick with it, and the term that I use is monism. And, there's just the one, and
Hmm.
separation is illusion. Um, my critique of it, the reason that I rebel against it, is even though I'm attracted to it, is that there could be no true morality if there are no lasting consequences for the
Hmm.
choices that we make as these individual beings. Because
Right.
people in the East and the New Age, they say if you press them, they will admit that separation is only illusion and the ultimate reality is God, and there's no possibility of an eternal separation from God. Is that correct from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a good summary, I would
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
And you agree that there's no morality, there's just the theater of morality? Is that a fair critique?
It depends on who you ask because there are many Hindus who use the exact same argument against other Hindus, especially the founder of the Hare Krishna movement. I was just listening to an interview of him where he was saying this idea that aham brahmasmi, all is one, is very dangerous to the
Oh,
spiritual seeker
okay, okay.
because then how can one, decide between eating another life form or eating something that's just other or organic plant material? Where's the morality? If it's all Brahman, it's all one, then what's the point in it? So you're absolutely right in having that pet
Ah,
peeves, and it's also
ah,
shared by many other Eastern practitioners of the same
oh,
faith.
oh. What's the name of the founder of Hare Krishna?
His name is A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada.
Ah, he wrote the famous book, that famous book, which was an explanation, or what was it called? Do you remember the name of that one?
He's got the Bhagavad Gita as it
Yeah,
is.
that's
Is
the
a
one.
famous,
That's
yeah,
the one. Yeah, that's the one. I think it has a yellow cover from the one that I saw kicking around.
that's right.
But yeah, I mean, so that's very interesting. So when it comes to duality, non-duality, and partial duality, these are, as it's been explained to me, these are sort of the three camps of Hinduism. Not to say that you're a Hindu or an expert in Hinduism, but I think you know more than I do. So where's your preference? Do you have a preference, and if so, why?
Well, I certainly used to be more drawn towards that non-duality. I think
Ah,
it is very alluring to the intellect because it's very satisfying that all is one and there's nothing more intricate than that. It's just Brahman. But in my own practice, I found that when I struggled with things like anxiety, this knowledge that all is one didn't help so much as actually add to the depth of my panic in the moment. So when push finally came to shove, I do consider it as a grace, but now I consider duality to actually be such a blessing because in moments like those where you're so low and having such existential dread, it's actually so healing to just call out to some higher power. Just what else is there left to do in such a moment of humility than just pray? And it, funny enough, started to heal my anxiety. And before I knew it, anxiety was less of an enemy as it was a friend. And I found that chanting the glories of God from a dualistic perspective was much more practically uh, important in my spiritual practice than trying to conceptualize myself as one with it.
yeah, wow. Glad to hear it. Very glad to hear it. And I don't know if you know anything about me, probably not, but I was a hard solipsist at one point, which is basically like the god of Buddhism, that kind of disembodied mind, the only being, and it was all theater for me. Like it was just like my own body and the rest of the material world and the other persons. They were just part of like a video game or simulation or my
Sure.
imagination as God. I was God. I thought I was wrong, but I I thought I was God. So that's part of my background, and I'd gone through a lot of anxiety as a young person, about your age, early 20s, a lot of anxiety and abstract fear, sort of the fear of fear. And
Exactly.
there was a sort of avoidance that's built into that, like, oh, here comes the fear, got to look away. But I finally figured out after a year of turmoil and angst and despair, frankly, and I was an atheist at the time, um, that it was only by looking into the fear, facing the fear, as you said, it's that anxiety is no longer an adversary. Now it's like a grace for you, because I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think that's sort of what you
Mhm.
were alluding to. But
Mhm.
by confronting the fear, looking into the fear, it just disappears. Whereas if you try to avoid it, it's always in the periphery. It's always like a shadow. So maybe you can relate to what I went through.
Absolutely. Yeah. Seems to be around our 20s, these kinds of thoughts prop up.
Yeah. So, when it comes to your dualism, is this a minority camp within Eastern thought? Because most people like the non-dualist way.
I would say it's a it's a minority in those of us in the West that are drawn towards the Eastern practice. But if you travel to the East, you'll find that it's the other way
Ah.
around.
Oh, really? Ah, I'm glad to hear it. Um, I want to just give a, I don't want to be rude, but I want to give a shout out. I think some of your people are here in the live chat. So someone named Damn Daddy Do just showed up. He referred to you as our teacher, unless he's referring to me as his teacher, in which case, please go seek professional help. But Nicola Krisick is here. That's my old friend. Phil Gonzalez is here. He's going to be doing some really stinky one-liner jokes in the live chat, no doubt. Roxy R is here. Sky Guardian, maybe someone you know. He says, he or she says, tell Yam Radhe Radhe from me, whatever that means. And
Radhe, Radhe,
I
yes.
got Kelly James and Tat Vam Asi. Maybe you know some of these people, Sky Guardian,
I
and
am
my friend
familiar, yes.
Pie Chris. So yeah, a lot of people here showing up more than usual. So thank you for that.
Oh,
And
welcome, everyone.
yeah. So are you actually a guru? Are you like a bona fide guru?
No, no.
Okay. You have a presence online. I don't know what you get up to. So what's the deal there?
That's right. Yeah, I used to make a lot of educational videos about mathematics and physics,
Oh, no way.
spirituality, and religion,
Ah,
um, and I reached many people. I think tens of millions
no way.
of views, and but I kind of got rid of all of it because I felt as though in my own personal practice, I was feeling like there was a disconnect between what I was sharing and what I was speaking. You know, you have to walk the talk. What you preach and teach has to be in line with your heart. And although there was some good gems in what I was sharing, I felt along the non-dual path that I was going, as I mentioned, had anxiety troubles. So I took down all of my content across all my platforms. And now instead, what I do is a live stream every day around the same time. I do a sangha, which is just a Sanskrit term that means a spiritual gathering for us to deepen our faith and uplift each other's, share experiences, ask questions.
Ah, very cool. Yeah, I got too many people to say hello to here in the live chat, but one of them, I'm always impressed when someone uses the plural namaskar instead of namaste, because all the Westerners usually just say namaste all the time, even though it's addressing a group. But
Yeah.
I did study a tiny bit of Hindi back in the day. But have you looked into the languages, Sanskrit, and these sorts of things, just to any depth whatsoever? Just
Oh,
passively, or
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
okay?
I've been learning Hindi on Duolingo, and
Ah,
I feel quite comfortable with my Sanskrit knowledge as well.
no way. Wow. That's like one of my top favorite languages to learn. I mean, I haven't put any effort into that, but that would be like a very, very interesting language, very mathematical and logical, right?
Absolutely. That's right. It's a good description of it. It's so many exceptions in English where you introduce a rule and 10 different
Break it.
exceptions to it. But in Sanskrit, there seems to be a kind of harmony with all the rules.
Wow. Very cool. I do love, I do love the culture of the East and the attitude of the East. And like I said earlier, I alluded to the fact that, I am very sympathetic to monism, but I'm just concerned that people would get seduced into thinking that they're not in danger. So how do you respond when a monotheist
Mhm.
is embracing an eternal hell, the reality of eternal hell? Not that I want to go there, but the fact
Yeah.
that I'm happy with the fact that there is an eternal hell, because it means that my choices do matter, and it gives me a sense of urgency, and it makes life into an adventure as opposed to just being God on vacation slumming it in his imagination. So what
I'd
is it?
say
Can you
that
talk to me about hell and the monotheist perspective on hell? Can you relate to it? Do you think there's anything to my claim that there can be no morality without an eternal hell?
I believe that faith can be motivated by fear of damnation and desire for salvation. However, I also believe that this is just one level of faith that an aspirant may have. And there are higher levels which are unmotivated by uh, the fear of outcome and attachment to reward.
Yeah.
When it comes to hell and this idea of an eternal hell, for me, I experience both hell and heaven as opportunities that exist within every moment. And whether you make this moment a heaven or a hell is entirely your business. So many of us live with thoughts that are constantly judging ourselves and others. We can truly create a pit of fire and turmoil within our own minds. But at the same time, if we fill ourselves with compassion and honesty, then we create a sort of heaven.
Yeah, well, I mean, I disagree. I strongly disagree. No offense, but the
Of course,
fact
that's
is
okay.
that the fact is that there's something about hope. Okay, well, I should preface this just by telling you, if you don't already know, maybe you do know, that there are three theological virtues. There's supernatural virtues without which you can't be saved, from my perspective.
Hmm.
And they are faith, hope, and love. You've probably heard about it your whole life. Faith, hope, and charity. Okay, St. Paul talks about this in the Bible. I'm sure you've read the Bible a couple of times or whatever. But so when it comes to hope and faith, we lose those at death. Like if we go to purgatory, we're already guaranteed heaven, and once we get to heaven, there's no need for hope because it's fulfilled, and there's no need for faith because we're seeing what we believed without seeing. And so all that's left is love. That's why St. Paul says the greatest of these three is love.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you would agree that the greatest is love and that God is love, right? You would agree with that. But when it comes to hope, I don't believe that you, in your monism, that you are eligible for hope because you already have in hand the assurance of your enlightenment, or you're going back into the Godhead, or whatever I don't know how
I
you
see
call
what
it,
you mean.
nirvana,
Yeah,
So there's no room for hope for the monist.
right.
There's only room for the theater of hope and the theater of faith and the theater of morality. So
Mm.
that's my bone to pick. So I mean, I can't just keep saying the same things over and over to you and to every guest that's New Age or Eastern thought. But I'd just like to hear your perspective once again on that. Hope.
That's a beautiful point, that this idea that we have to put in our effort to attain something that's not guaranteed. So I guess the main point here is that you can't be lazy on the spiritual path. Otherwise, there is a kind of goal which is unattainable for those of us that don't strive to put in our 100% effort. Is that kind of
That's part of the
what you were
equation.
thinking of?
That is definitely part of the equation. But you're giving me a major guilt trip here because I'm not giving 100%.
Oh,
I'm
please.
not. No, no,
No,
no, no,
no,
no,
go
no,
for it.
no, 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 no. It's not you. It's not you. It's not you. I mean, I appreciate it. I want to be chastised, and not that that was your intention. It's not your intention, but it's like, oh man, I'm so lazy. I'm so lazy with the spiritual life. But that's part of the reason I do the podcast, is to talk to people and to remind myself, that I can't just talk about it. I actually have to be virtuous and have to do the work, right? So when it comes to virtue, I know that there is talk of virtue in the Eastern philosophies and religions. So, but it's a different framing of the virtues. It's almost like like you alluded to the fact that fear is maybe a good motivator, but it's not a perfect motivator. That's what my church teaches me. That fear is the beginning of wisdom, but it's not the fullness of wisdom. So yeah, I agree with you. There are levels of faith and of spirituality, and I hope to rise above this sort of impoverished level that I'm at. But when it comes to the virtues, I get the impression from people that are on your side of the line that there's a sort of goodness for goodness sake um, element, which I don't have. Like, I mean, I don't have that impulse to be selfless and to be good. I have the impulse to be selfish and lazy. So I have to fight against that tendency with God's grace, right? I have to ask God for the grace to help me to rise above my
Mm.
inclinations. But it seems when I talk to people that are on your side, they just say, "Well, no, why wouldn't you want to be good?" I mean, it's just like it's better to be good. It's better to be good. Well, I know it's better to be good. I know that. You don't have to tell me that, but it's
Right.
it's harder. It's hard, right? So maybe just address all of that.
Well, I do want to be clear that it's not that I'm on one side and other people are on another side. I do believe that if you stick wholeheartedly with your faith, whatever it is, I only wish to enhance it, not to give you some new perspective. But I
Uh-huh.
will entertain your question.
Uh-huh.
When it comes to this idea of morality arising within rather than given by God, I think it's just semantic
Uh-huh.
difference in that if one says it arises naturally from within, then, well, perhaps that's just another way of saying that the source that's omnipresent and thus within you as well is inspiring such thoughts of goodness as a part of your manifestation of creation. You have within you a very small portion. You are part and parcel of that source. So all the qualities of goodness and compassion and love are qualities that we inherit from the Father. And so it is both in our nature as a manifestation of creation, as well as inspired by God, because we are the very inspirations of creation through his service to all of these souls. But there is also in the Vedas, from a Vedic perspective, this idea that all of our defects are also graces from God, and that in order for us to come to higher virtues such as love and hope and compassion and honesty, sincerity, all these things have to happen voluntarily. And you can't force love out of someone. If service was forced, then it wouldn't be service, it would be slavery. So, in this way, in the Eastern philosophy, the Source has imbued us with the ability to go against our nature so that we may voluntarily come to the revelation of truth for ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you for that. I'm just wondering about the whole reincarnation doctrine. It seems to be uniformly believed by the New Age and the Hindus and the Buddhists and everyone else, all of the monists. Uh, are there any exceptions? Is there any school in the East that's not monotheistic but does not believe in reincarnation? Have you ever discovered anything like that?
I'm sure that there is. I'm
Uh,
unfamiliar myself,
uh-huh.
though.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So when it comes to reincarnation, it just seems like a silly idea to me, and it's forbidden. I can't believe it as a Christian, but um, one of my friends made a joke the other week about like if you end up being reincarnated as a carrot, for example, how do you claw your way back? How can you be a good carrot so that next time you come back, what's the mechanism? What's the teaching behind escaping or
Mhm.
rising up once you've gone that low? Or not to mention if you end up being a stone or a mineral of some sort.
Yeah.
How do you rise out? Is it just pure grace at that point? Just the grace, like you've done your time and the grace elevates you, or what?
According to the Vedic thought, the reincarnation system does have a time component,
Okay.
and that there is a hierarchy of births that you can take. Human being at the right precipice between the celestial abode and the hellish abode, where an animal incarnation happens when one is keeping animalistic desires in their mind at the moment of death. Similarly, if you keep celestial desires in your mind at the moment of death, and you arise to the heavens. However, no finite action can imply an infinite repercussion. So, the fundamental difference between heaven and hell in the Eastern thought and the West is that heaven and hell have a time limit in the East, where you serve your time and then return to the earthly plane. And so when you do get reborn as a carrot, that is part of what it means to be in hell, because you have no way to arise other than to serve your time. That is your punishment for having such desires in your past human incarnation. Thus, when you do serve your time, so to speak, and return to earth, now is your chance to rise again so that you don't have to meet the same fate. But conversely, if one attains to a heavenly body, this too has a time limit, since the good merits that we can do in one life is only so finite that it could not lead to some infinite reward. For example, we only have such a small lifetime, so many people to give love to. We could do our best to do as most good as we can, but it will only lead to this much time in heaven. But even in heaven, there are sufferings going on, according to this Eastern thought, because this idea of heaven that we are supposed to be rewarded for our coming to higher awareness, our senses are inherently finite, and thus we can only receive so much pleasure. Eventually, we still need to find that higher purpose, which gives infinite bliss. And that can come not from receiving the rewards of your past actions in a finite life, but through infinite births and deaths, continual service. So we pull what's inside of our heart and share it with others. That way, as an infinite soul, though a smaller infinity than the infinite super soul that is God, we get to constantly experience the bliss of enlightenment through our continual service with our fellow creatures on this planet.
So when it comes to God per se, God in himself, um, he's not ignorant of anything. He's not surprised by anything, right? Is that true, you'd say?
Depends on which agency of God we're referring to. Of course, as the all pervasive source of reality, there
Yeah.
is nothing that is out of his awareness. But if God chooses to incarnate, such as taking on the body of Jesus, then he can purposefully limit his own awareness, but for the purpose of the divine play that he's putting on, for the story, for the passion.
Yeah. If
Obviously, Jesus, in his super soul, was aware that uh, who was it that betrayed him? I'm
Judas.
forgetting. Judas. But in the story, he was consciously ignorant for the purpose of the symbolism that is imbued into the Holy Bible.
When we think about the number of, you know, lower animals and vegetables and minerals in this universe, um, it seems like humans are outnumbered. So it seems like there's a lot of prison time, a lot of purgatory, sort of
So it
purgatory,
would
a lot of
seem, yeah.
purgatory. You know, in the pyramid of these incarnations, of these manifestations, it seems like it's just a very small slice at the top for those who have an opportunity to be enlightened or to escape. What is it? Samsara, is that what you call it?
That's right. Which is
Um,
why this human birth is so precious, because it's a, one in a trillion, one in a quadrillion chance to
right.
utilize your higher purpose.
Yeah. So if we were to look at a timeline which is absurd because you claim to have infinite lives behind you and ahead of you, right?
Mhm.
So it's absurd to even contemplate an actual infinity of spatio-temporal events. It's an impossibility. That's another reason why I'm not a monist. But if we were to just for fun look at this band of happenings and events and the theater that God is engaged in, uh, there are no peaks and valleys per se. There's not an exciting part here and a boring part there, and a busy part here and a quiet part there. It's all sort of constantly averaged out because the pendulum. If there's a pendulum swinging, you know, good times, bad times, good times, bad times. That swinging pendulum is a constant, right? Like
That's right.
the very motion and the movement of it uh, is monotonous. It's really is monotonous when looked at from a bird's eye view. So what do you have to say about that sort of perspective, looking at the timeline and sort of
Mhm.
the absurd, hellish repetition of it?
Well, that's exactly the definition of samsara. The eternal cycle of births and deaths. It gets monotonous. So there must be some out of the box way of achieving some higher purpose beyond the rise and fall of human existence or physical existence more generally.
But when you think about the masters who have escaped, or I don't know what the term is, um, there have always been masters. There will always be masters, right?
Yeah.
But when you step back and you look at it, it's just like it's so, even that is repetitive, even that is predictable, even that is not showing up in any sort of significant way. When we zoom out and we look at the big picture, it's just like this fractal image that just keeps going and going and going and going. So to me, it doesn't sound very satisfying. I don't know what you're looking forward to, because as a Christian, I'm looking forward to getting out of this imperfect fallen world where sin abounds, and going to a place where there'll be no more tears, there'll be no more illness, no more confusion, no more ill will.
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to that. But what do you have to look forward to, really?
The exact same thing.
But for a
But the
limited time,
difference is
for a
that
limited time, only for a limited time, and then dip back into the carrot life or whatever, right?
not that way, but I see what you mean. Not that kind of heaven. I mean the eternal kind of bliss is what I'm looking forward to.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. So that I don't know, what do you have a special word for that God that sits above the theater, his theater? It's sort of
I'm sure we could come up with many terms, but I'm
but is
not sure
that
what
the
you're looking
Brahman
for.
or whatever you called it?
Sure, yeah, many people use the word Brahman to refer to what's beyond even heaven
What
in
does
the
that
Hindu
word
idea.
actually mean? Is that can you break it down in terms of
Sure,
etymology?
linguistically, the brah is referring to the quality of expansion and omnipresence,
Okay.
basically. And
Unboundedness, is that right?
yes, and man is like a suffix that kind of just puts it into an object, puts it into a noun form for us to just
Okay.
call as one.
I
So
see.
Brahman is like one who is omnipresent, basically, within
Ah,
everything.
okay, 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 okay. So, um, I'm just curious how you would get me to understand the, like the analogy that I like to use. It's a crude analogy, but let's say that I'm the Brahman or whatever, and I've got this, I don't really have hands, but I just manifest hands, and then I've got my 10 fingers, and I do little finger puppets, and I do put on a performance, but it's just me, right? It's just me. I'm alone. I'm alone, and it's like I'm entertaining myself with these finger puppets, and it's very creative. It's very believable, and it's very interesting, and there's a certain reality, to everything that I do as Brahman or whatever. There's a certain reality to it, but it's a lower reality compared to the higher reality of my being, and I can shake off these finger puppets, and there are no consequences to me. So, is there some sort of goal where the individual, like yourself, is there a goal where you believe that you could actually permanently escape? I mean, and just have that perspective, that top down perspective all the time. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not different than from the same which is discussed in Christianity.
Okay.
It's just the wording in which we use to discuss these things changes. For example, heaven in the East refers to something subtly different than heaven in the West. But it's not that there's one group which is thinking the right way about heaven and the other the wrong way. It's that we're just literally using these words to describe two different aspects. There are many Hindus, for example, that simultaneously believe in Krishna as do the Christ and have both pictures on their wall. For for example, there really isn't such a thing called as Hinduism. This is a word brought by the colonials of India.
Uh, Hindus Valley and all that.
That's right. But the Sanskrit term which the aspirants use are the Sanatana Dharma, which linguistically means the universal practice. So
Catholic
literally, it
priests.
means inclusive to all paths.
Uh-huh.
So the Christ is seen as an avatar in the Sanatana Dharma, but just expands on the incarnations that have happened. But just as the Christ said in his form, the kingdom of heaven is within you, which to me is a, can be interpreted to mean that it's not something that you need to seek beyond yourself, as if it's something awaiting you up there or in another point in time, but something that one can dive within themselves at any time, such as, during the crucifixion, during such suffering, he was able to find his source within himself and find the ability to be humble and ask for forgiveness on behalf of those who were crucifying him, literally. So it's not that the goal of religion is to achieve some state after this birth, but within yourself to find that state of heaven and eternity in the eternity of your immortal soul.
Yeah. So is there a sense in which you and I have two souls, and a sense in which you and I share a soul? Or do you see, maybe just talk about that with the soul? What do you mean exactly?
Well, there's kind of two ways we use the word soul in English, but in Sanskrit, we do break it down into jiva and atman. Jiva is like the individual soul, whereas atman refers to the soul that is both within you and I at the
Okay.
same time. But no one can deny that there is an individual experience happening here and an individual experience happening there. It's just that the substance of the experience is the same. What constitutes the soul within me is non-different than the constitution of your soul.
Do you see, when it comes to idealism, the idea that um, what we perceive as material or physical is just a mental construct? That's where I was at when I was a hard solipsist. Um, does the East generally, and I guess it's maybe going to boil down to the dualist, non-dualist, semi-dualist sort of discussion.
That's
Maybe,
right.
maybe that's where it's at, like the sort of how you classify the reality of the material. Is that
Yes. Yeah, sure. I'm sure you could.
right? But how do you personally, how do you categorize the material, and sort of, because in monotheism we have
Mhm.
a real material universe. It's really real, although it's nothing compared to God. It's like so fleeting, and it's only sustained because it's in the mind of God. Okay, so right away I'm already giving caveats that sort of lean towards this idealism, where it's just an idea. But that's what my church teaches me. Like, it's real, but it's only real because it's in the mind of God. So it's very slippery territory when we talk about
Right.
this sort of stuff. But
I
uh,
agree.
so what do you say about that? Is this stuff real, or is it only real because it's in the mind of God, or both? Because I'm kind of
Yeah,
saying I'm kind of saying both. Like, I guess.
right. It depends on your perspective. Of course,
Ah,
the material existence is by nature secondary to the
yeah.
infinite existence of God, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful to be here because it's our duty to be in this limited form now for us to experience our lessons during this time.
Yeah, I always ask everyone, usually, if it occurs to me, but there's no one that's off the table. Monotheists, monists, whatever, even atheists. I always ask about suicide, like, why not? Why not suicide? And I've never met anyone yet who thinks it's a good idea. I've never met anyone who says, "Yeah, go for it." Everyone says, "No, don't do that." I'm not saying, because I'm not. It's not on the table for me. I'm not interested in that. But
No,
I'm
it's a good philosophical question.
yeah.
Why
So where do
not?
you stand on that? Why not?
Well, I really like what the Buddhists say about it. They say you can, but there's no point. It's not like suicide is an escape from suffering,
Uh-huh.
especially with the idea of reincarnation. You can
Yeah.
temporarily evade your karma, but you'll only be back up here to engage in it once more.
I just want to respond to my friend in the live chat. He says, I'm convinced we are in hell. And I'm just saying, there's no hope in hell. You know, we do have hope. We do have hope here. And when I asked you about hope, I don't remember if you actually gave me a concrete
Mm,
example of your hope. I do recall that you mentioned this, you know, that union with God or something like
yeah.
that. But maybe just talk a little bit more about hope. Remind me what you said and elaborate.
I have hope that in every moment I can strive to be the best version of myself in a way that expresses the divinity of the source. It's not that I hope for some particular event in time to happen and then after that it all makes sense. For me, my sense of time is more limited to just this moment, in that regardless of what awaits me in the next moment, I know that it's my duty to attend to this one,
Yeah.
lest I become distracted by some ideal in the future.
Be here now, I think was the famous saying. It was popularized
That's right.
in the late 60s in the hippie culture.
Yeah.
It's sound advice. I mean, it's if you read the lives of the Christian saints, they were in the moment. They weren't like, you know, in some fantasy land like a lot of us, myself first and foremost, are in the sort of a fantasy land of what will be, you know, my next meal, you know, what I'm gonna,
Yeah.
I'm at work, oh well, soon I'll get to go home, and it's just like, you know what I mean. I'm very,
Compassion is so important to the Christian tradition, and that requires you to really be present with those around you and what their needs are and how you can attend to them.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So I'm agreeing with you, you know, about most of your doctrines. I disagree about reincarnation. I disagree that it's the infinite cycle of samsara. I disagree about that. And how do you know, how do you know, is there a test that's proposed in the East to say, well, here's the proof that it's, you know, it's been going on forever and it's going to continue forever, this samsara wheel?
Mm,
What's
mm,
the, what are the sort of logical tests? Because I know in the East they do value reason, logic, and
mhm.
pursuing the truth with the intellect, right? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's a lower level of spirituality.
The intellect absolutely has its import in judging for yourself what traditions are of merit and what you might want to uh, let go of. The logical reasoning for reincarnation, and I will preface that uh, I don't believe it to be so mutually exclusive to the Christian idea of rebirth in a new world or in heaven. In fact, there seems to be parallels in between the prophet of the New Testament, or not prophet per se, but the prophet of the Old Testament and the savior figure of the New Testament. The relationship between Jesus and John seems very parallel to Elisha and Eliza in the Old Testament. And there's some verse, I forget it, perhaps you'd know, where it alludes to Jesus's reincarnation. And of course, there is going to be another incarnation of the Christ, the
Oh, you're
second
talking
coming.
about, you know, some people say that he's the reincarnation. Saint John the Baptist is the reincarnation of Elijah or whatever. Is that what you're
That's
talking
right.
about? When he was imprisoned for speaking out against
And
the
so too, has his own history of reincarnating, as many Christians expect for the next age or whenever it is. So there does seem to be a subtle overlap. And I'm also reminded of another verse, which I'm afraid I can't quote, so I must paraphrase, of something about those who shall not attain to heaven shall be forced to return back, or something like that. Those who are unable to accept the words of the Lord must return over and over until they attain to salvation, which is very similar to the concept of samsara until one reaches nirvana in Buddhism.
You'll have to send me the proof text for that one because I've never heard that before. But
I'll be happy to look into
yeah,
it,
yeah,
and do
yeah, yeah, yeah.
forgive
You
me
could do
for.
that after, after we're done chatting here, and I only have 10 minutes left with you. But
Sure.
as always, you're welcome to come back. It's been nice talking with you. I'd like to use this last 10 minutes to sort of allow you to emphasize some of the bullet points that are important to you. It doesn't necessarily have to do with you know your own personal journey. It could have to do with just ideas that you're playing with, or books that you're reading, or
Mhm.
your personal development, if that's the case, or it could be anything. But I want to give you the floor and allow you to sort of pick and choose what we talk about for the last 10 minutes.
Well, thank you for that. It's very kind to open up the space for some last points from my perspective. Um, I did want to point out that I didn't quite get to answering your question
Okay.
about what the logical reasoning is
Oh
behind
yeah,
the
yeah, 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 yeah,
reincarnation.
yeah.
So, to that, I will summarize that it's not so different than the logical reasoning that goes into how we judge theories in our own physics, that for certain we may never know what the ultimate truth is when it comes to which equation of physics, which interpretation of quantum mechanics is correct. However, there are some generally agreed upon points for how we judge theories, and one of them is to see how fruitful the axioms of the theory are. Do these assumptions produce consequences which seem to answer a lot of questions? And to me, the assumption of reincarnation is not so different in that if one tries to practice engaging in the assumption of reincarnation, even if it's just for a day, just see how that shapes how you attend to the actions of your day. For example, how does it change how you feel when you accidentally step on an ant? How does it feel when you come across some trauma within your own life that can't seem to be explained by your experiences up till now? And how does it change how you feel about those that might, say, pass away due to some untimely death before they were able to find some salvation in and of themselves? That is one kind of hope, speaking of hope, that we discussed earlier, where there is this assumption that life goes on, and through that, there is no untimely death. There's always room for you to come back and continue to learn some lesson that perhaps hasn't been learned yet.
My friend Phil made a good joke. He said, I've stepped on lots of ants, but I've never stepped on an uncle. So it's a different kind of different sense of humor this guy has. So, and I'm paraphrasing, heavily paraphrasing his joke. But yeah, if you have other topics to bring up, meanwhile, I'll just sort of freestyle with my question. That's all I've been doing anyway. That's all I ever do.
Mhm.
But when it comes to food, the vegetarian diet, I happen to like the um, what do they call those people? The Hare Krishnas. I happen to like their diet. I think it's Ayurvedic. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
I like that because I like carbs and I don't like garlic and onions. So it's like I just love it. So when it comes to food, are you middle of the road? Are you extreme one way or the other? How do you make your food choices?
I try to make my food choices based on how it'll affect my mind.
Okay.
In Ayurveda, especially, there is the
Oh, you like
idea
that?
that, yeah, yeah, there's lots of foods that, just tend to make the mind want to go into a food coma, and it makes it harder to be compassionate and understanding with others when you're in that mood. And
Yeah.
similarly, if you drink a lot of coffee or have spices such as garlic and onion, then that can
Okay.
activate the mind. And so you'll be
Okay.
much more egoic in who you're talking to. So there's kind of a sacred science to ensuring that the food you eat implies a peaceful mind.
Oh, my friend Sky Guardian says, ask Yam have you tell you the story of how he met his guru. It's epic. So we have about 5 minutes left. If you can manage to squeeze that story in here about how you met your guru.
Sure, that's a good challenge.
No,
Well,
you could take a little bit longer. It's no problem.
when I was in university, I started listening to Sadhguru, which I'm sure you might be familiar with. He's a prominent Indian guru himself.
Okay.
And in one of his videos, he was talking about the importance of finding a living master, someone who is able to teach you directly. And so I was very inspired, and I put into my satchel a piece of cardboard that I had written with Sharpie, "May my guru come to me, may my guru come to me," over and over again. And I wandered my city very emphatically, expecting, some holy man to show up and say, "I will be your teacher, you will be my disciple." Of course, this is just a fantasy of mine, and such things never transpired the way you expect. Nonetheless, that day that I did wander through the city, I came across this shawl that appeared at my feet, this beautiful orange shawl slash scarf slash tapestry, kind of the material of this. Um, and I knew that it was important. I just kind of had that faith, but I didn't know what to do with it. So I just took it and went home. And it wasn't until many years later that I discovered that Sanskrit was embedded all over it. And of course, I didn't know how to speak Sanskrit then. So I also spent some years learning Sanskrit so I'd be able to translate it. And when I did finally translate it, the very first word on it was none other than the thing I was looking for that day, which was guru. And then the very second word, Kripalu, which is the name of a guru known as Jagat Guru Sri Kripalu Ji Maharaj. And I found that very funny.
Is he
I
Sikh?
asked,
Is he a Sikh man?
he's a Hindu man.
Oh, oh, because there's a science of the soul that I was sort of part of this organization, cult or sect or whatever you want to call it. It was like a Sikh sect, and I only joined it because I thought this girl was cute that invited me into it. But I didn't really believe. But they gave me a mantra and stuff like that. And when I joined the Catholic Church, they had to I had to reveal my mantra, and they prayed the demons away and all that sort of stuff. But
Mhm.
anyway, continue with your story. Sorry to interrupt.
That's quite all right. Um, I found it very funny then that, I prayed to God for a living master that would I would come to, but instead a dead master came to me in the form of a shawl, which is an interesting point that he left his body 10 years before I found this shawl. So it was a very interesting
Ah,
coincidence, I
you still have
suppose.
it?
And I do, it's sitting behind this camera
Ah,
actually.
you said it was red, oh, orange. You said it was orange. Is that a sacred color?
It tends to be, yeah, many Buddhists
Buddhist.
and swamis seem to wear the ochre robes.
Uh-huh. Do you feel pressure? It seems like you're gonna say no, but do you feel pressure or compulsion, inner compulsion to define your path and to pick a lane and to say I'm this and not that? Pretty sure I can predict you're gonna say no, but what's your answer?
Two men were in a hospital. First one asks the second, "How did you get here?" The second says, "I didn't follow anyone's advice. What about you?" The first man says, "I followed everyone's advice." So one should strive to pick a path for themselves so that they may carve out a straightforth path towards their salvation. However, in my opinion, it doesn't matter what you pick as long as you put your heart into it. And that especially goes to everyone listening, including all of the lovely fellow Roman Catholics. I truly want all of you to appreciate the beauties of your faith, and I hope that you attain the companionship of the Lord and deepen your understanding of the Bible and affection for the church. So all my blessings, if I even have the ability to do that, to
Of course you do.
all
Of
those
course,
who are
of course you do.
listening.
Of course, of course. Um, one last little throwaway question. It's about Mother Teresa. She allegedly said, if you're Hindu, be the best Hindu you could be. If you're Muslim, be the best Muslim you could be. If you're Christian, be the best Christian you could be. And I don't know if she said if you're an atheist, be the best atheist you could be. But maybe just comment. I don't know for sure that she said that, but what if she did, and what would that mean? Does it jive with your outlook?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that truth being omnipresent implies that it shall arise anywhere given enough patience, enough time, enough seeking. Even like you and I, who once identified as atheists, we found a lot of truth in that at the time. And now we've just let go of some other barriers and came to some more appreciation of other paths besides atheism. And I would agree, like Mother Teresa, it doesn't matter who you are as long as you put your all into it.
When you're alone, this is a strange question, but I'm just curious. When you're alone, no one's looking, are you selfish and temperamental? So basically, the question is, are you on your best behavior when it's a public sphere? Like now you're live on the internet, right? So are you
Yeah,
on
of
your best
course.
behavior? And do you, like, when you stub your toe at home and no one's around to hear you curse?
Yeah.
I don't think it's good to curse, but I do it when I stub my toe. Something nasty comes out. So I don't want to encourage that in myself or in you. But I'm just wondering: are you human? Is this the sort of thing that happens to you?
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, but I am aware that just as, it's important to put on the best version of yourself in front of others, so too it's important that within yourself, it's good to maintain the same kind of understanding with your own self and treat yourself with love and kindness when you're by yourself. But it's a lot easier to put on that kind of show when other people are
Yeah,
around you. Fake it
yeah.
till you make it kind of.
Of course, of course, of course. We're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat with that, by the way. But yeah. Oh, you just reminded me of a very interesting question. Oh, yeah. What was it? Oh boy, I wonder if I can remember this before I have to sign off here. But you're alone. You're stubbing your toe. Um, yeah. Let me just think about this for a moment. Enjoy the awkward silence. Enjoy the awkward silence while I try to think about this. If it doesn't come to me, I'll have to have you back. But yeah, I think it's gone. I think it's gone. But it was a very interesting question. I'll get you next time. No, I'll get you next time.
Great.
So
Look forward to it.
what do you said you do these live streams now? Um, so I'm just wondering, like, where is that leading, and what does the future hold for your online presence? Or are you going to end up doing like physical in-person sessions, workshops, these sorts of things? Like a lot of my guests actually end up doing these sorts of life coaching and or retreats. So what do you envision for yourself, or do you have a more humble vision for your future?
I truly see myself as just a fellow spiritual seeker, and
Yeah.
I feel like to be in a position of some kind of authority figure is is a lot to ask of a human, given all the temptations that arise with it. But for now, I'm very happy. Just doing my live streams and just trying to be in service to others and enhance their path, whatever path they're on, and try to open a space where people feel comfortable to be themselves in. As far as the future of what I want to do, I don't even know what I'm going to eat for dinner tonight, so we'll have to see.
Hey, guess what happened? I got a special grace, and I remember the question I was going to ask you. Okay,
Oh,
so
do tell.
yeah, it's about sexual morality. I'm just curious, in the Catholic Church, it's seen to be very, limiting and constructing, and maybe even repressive. It's not actually, but it's supposed to be a flourishing, when we put sex in its proper place. It's one of the highest goods that we have. But there's this misconception that we're all repressed and perverted because of it. I don't know what the East teaches. I know, the famous sex manual with the pictures. You have that, and
Right.
you've got the
Tantra. Yeah.
yeah, and you've got the Kundalini and all that sort of stuff. But just as a really, really, really brief introductory summary outline, are you allowed to masturbate? Like, because we're not as Christians. Uh, some Protestants, I think that it's okay, but in the Catholic Church, it's strictly forbidden. And certainly, adultery, fornication, same-sex stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so where do you stand personally, and sort of what's the general approach in the East?
Mm. So the Sanskrit term is brahmachari, which is celibacy. And
Okay.
it is a very high virtue if someone can abstain from
Oh,
releasing the sexual energy, because that's important energy that you could use for the service of others. The orgasm releases so much of hormones, and it's such a release of energy that it's better spent doing something more selfless, like serving others. So it is recommended to spiritual seekers to conserve that energy,
okay.
for one, but also so that we, don't sexualize the objects of our
Ah,
experience and develop a kind of purity with that. But
mm,
there is also a general lenience as well, which says that forgive yourself if you do fall into such a temptation. It's very natural. Just do your best to keep up the abstaining next time.
yeah, that sounds very Catholic. Both aspects, the strong recommendation, and then the availability of forgiveness. If you do fall, and a lot of men do fall into pornography and masturbation, these sorts of things. So it is pretty nasty. I would imagine, when it comes to illicit drugs, it's completely off the table. There's but again, if someone's addicted to cocaine or something, you would have that same compassion and try to just help them, support them to get out of that particular little mini hell, as you would describe it, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Alcoholism, these sorts of things. There's so many. And as you sort of alluded to, this gluttony where I could just eat what I want, that's sort of uh, frowned upon on your path. So yeah, there's a lot that I really do admire about the Eastern way. If you do come back, I have a lot more questions, but I just have to wrap up because I promised the wife. But I want to talk to you a little bit about Taoism next time. I want to talk to you, not that you're an expert, but you might have something to say. I
I
want
would
to talk
love
to you
to.
about Confucianism, just what your impressions are. You may have read and studied a little bit, right?
I
These
do
things.
love talking about various faiths, so I'd be delighted to, given the
Yeah,
opportunity.
nice. Yeah. So thank you so much. I hate to wrap it up. I want to keep talking, but I'm going to wrap it up here. And just please keep in touch, and I hope to have you back. And like I said, I have a lot more questions for you.
Thank you, David.
All right. So God bless you, and I hope you'll do whatever it is, the equivalent of prayer. I said this to a Hindu once, and he explained to me what his prayer consists of. His prayer
Sure.
basically consists of, accepting reality, which is to me a prayer for humility. He just prays to accept reality as it is,
Yeah,
and that I could do the same. So it seems like humility is at the heart of your prayer life. Is that accurate?
absolutely. And, by your blessing, I'll continue with that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So take good care, and we'll talk soon. Keep in touch.
All right.
God bless you,
Cheers,
Liam.
David.
Bye bye, Liam.
God bless.